Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Express. Well, this is a new week and a new episode on what is becoming everyone's favorite talk show. You'll agree with me that it is encouraging, exciting, profound, real, energizing, sensible, and sensitive. This is what Express is all about, and much more. So, without any further delay, please help me welcome back to the stage the beautiful, expressive, talented, and savvy director of Express. She's called Carolyn. Carolyn, take it away.
Welcome to another episode of Express. I am your host, Carolyn. It has been a wonderful experience. Don't you agree? I have had calls, I have had texts, I have had emails of how much they've been enjoying this show. And I thank you, the people. So, if you will continue enjoying the show, why don't you share with others? Like, share, and subscribe so that others can benefit. Thank you so much. Yes, so our guest today is a couple. We have Sundiata and Pamela. Pamela loves to be called Pam, and Sundiata loves to be called Sunny. And their last name, by the way, is Ferguson. So you have Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson, okay? Let me just tell you a little about them. Sunny is a speaker, trainer, and a coach. He's an advocate for epilepsy, and he's a former surgeon of the U.S. Army. His wife, and by the way, they've been married for 5 years. They have 9 children and 5 grandchildren. Pamela has a tax and insurance firm for 20 years, and she assists with credit repairs, helps business funding, and also she helps businesses funding, especially truck drivers. I don't know where they find the time to do this with all that has happened and all that is happening. But anyway, stand still and sit back, as I always say, and relax and listen to their story. Thank you so much. Welcome to the show, Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson, Sunny and Pam. It has been years. Been watching you both. You have motivated me. And I am so glad that I've got the opportunity to invite you both to come on and to tell the world how you've pulled through your ups and downs and how you've got to this point. Okay, so my first question is, where were you born, Mrs. Sunny?
Okay. So I was born and raised in Trinidad and Tobago down in the Caribbean. And just to give people a little bit of perspective, and if you're not sure where that is, if you think about Miami and then you think about Cuba and you follow all the islands on that track, Trinidad and Tobago is the last island closest to South America, whenever you look at the atlas.
Okay, I'd love to go there one day. Yes, so you were born there and raised there. When did you come to the United States?
So in December of 1994, my now deceased mom decided I had already completed high school. And for those of you that may or may not know, the high school system in the Caribbean and even in many parts of Africa is based off of the British system of school. So I graduated high school at 16. And then I did 2 more years of advanced studies. So at the time I was 19, and my mom said, "All right, it's time." She wanted me to migrate, myself and my sisters to migrate to the U.S. And at the time, I had just been accepted to Howard University. Um, didn't end up attending, but there's a whole story behind that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, so you came to the United States
Yes.
in December around that time, 1994, about that time?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So Miss Pam, did you meet him then?
No, I did not.
Okay, okay. So let's wait until we get to that point, shall we? All right. If you want to come in and if you know something that you maybe miss out, you can always join.
Okay, I was still in high school.
Oh, you're still in high school. Okay. All right. Okay, it's amazing how God can put people together, right?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay, so you migrated, you came to the United States, and then what else? What's next?
So I got here in December, and in fact, about 2 weeks after I got here, I found a job because my mom had already had become a citizen, so I came as a permanent resident, so I was allowed to work and so on. Found a job, but to be honest though, my mom migrated to the U.S. in 1981. I was 5 at the time, and then 14 years later, I moved with her, and we weren't seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. She was not in approval of me wearing my dreads for a lot of reasons. Back then, it wasn't as readily accepted as it is now in terms
Yeah.
of it being a hairstyle. She was worried about how it would limit my opportunities, how society would perceive me as a black man here in the United States in 1995 wearing locks. And then, even though I was heading to Howard, a lot of the finances that I needed even on a partial scholarship to play soccer wasn't available. So I ended up meeting a friend of mine that was in the U.S. Army, and we started talking about that. And so I made a decision for two reasons. One, I wanted money for college, and back then they were offering like $30,000 for school. But the other thing was I personally felt like going into the army, not only would I get college, but it was a way for me to say thank you to the American people for allowing me the opportunity to be here. And so that service was my way of giving back. So exactly 6 months to the day that I arrived, I left on an airplane for Lawton, Oklahoma, Fort Sill, to start basic training in the United States Army.
Wow. Were you excited, or were you sort of like a bit afraid?
Uh, you know, I there was a little bit of trepidation because I mean I was going I came from a tropical island to New York, which is like an international hub, and then I left that, all my family, all my friends, and I was heading off to Oklahoma. I mean, the only thing I knew about Oklahoma was, about the Wild West days. So that there was some trepidation. Talk about a culture shock, if you will, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, heading to Oklahoma, but also I think because I didn't live with my mom for that period of time, and because I had already been working before I left Trinidad, and even when I got here, that sense of independence kind of drove me forward. Like, okay, no, I mean, technically, I got a job. You know what I mean? It's a different one, but here I am. I'll be on my own. I can, start making my way. And then, of course, the end goal was to get money for school, because my plan was do my 3 years, get my money for school, and then head back, reapply to attend Howard. That was I mean, I think going to Howard was the dream for me, right?
Yes.
Because of course, being a historically black college, but also Howard is a hub for a lot of Caribbean students. So
Hmm.
I knew a few people that were at Howard at the time as well. So
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So you got there.
Yeah, I did. I want to say this unequivocally. I used to have regrets about the decision I made to go into the army, because uh, I mean I gave up on my dream of attending Howard, and so there was some trepidation with regards to that. But ultimately, I will say that it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And as we go into more and more into the interview, I'll explain why I say that. But so I went to basic training. I went to advanced individual training, which is where they train you for your specific job in the military. And then in September of 1995, I headed to my first duty station, which was it was so unique because I went to basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I had my advanced training there, and then I got stationed there. So I was like, okay, well, I'll be here for 3 more years. But then, unfortunately, in February, early February of 1996, I was involved in a horrific training accident. My Humvee flipped. I was knocked unconscious. I suffered a traumatic brain injury. I also suffered significant damage to my right knee and my lower back. Um, why those are important is because, in spite of that, I still served another 6.5 years to do a total of 7 years in the Army with these injuries. And
Okay.
unfortunately,
So just stop for 1 minute. Let me back up a little. So you said you
yeah,
were unconscious.
yeah,
So you went to hospital, obviously. How long were you
yeah.
unconscious for?
I, yeah, they took me to the hospital. Um, but back in those days, the treatment of brain injuries is not what it is today. I was just diagnosed with a concussion, put on light duty, and sent back to work. That's how that worked.
Okay.
I mean, and at the time, I didn't understand the gravity of what happened. I just knew, hey, I'm a soldier. This is what I was trained to do. They
Mhm.
patch you up and they send you back. So I went back to
You
work, and then,
keep
like I
going.
said,
Mhm.
yeah, I continued serving after that. However, after the injury, there were some things that I did raise questions about. For one, my right pupil um, never regained its original size, so it stayed dilated after. Even today, it's still larger than the left one. It
Mm.
never went back to the original size. That was one thing. As a result of that, I started experiencing terrible
Headache.
sensitivity to light. You know,
Okay.
then I started having horrific headaches and migraines every day, to the point where when people have chronic pain, they just get so used to
Used
it,
to
right?
it.
It's like
Mhm. You
it's
just
like
accept
oh
it. Yeah.
yeah, people ask you how you feeling today. Man, my head hurts, but I'll be okay. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
But the biggest thing that changed now, Pam will tell you, will attest to this. I am totally a social butterfly, right? I am the happy, outgoing, which works perfectly for us because she's the quiet, more observant one. So whenever we go into any space, she's kind of looking at everything and making sure, and she has this gut thing that she'll say,
Human
Cindyana,
intuition.
yeah, she has this thing she'll say, Cindyana, be careful, and then sure enough. Right after something will happen, and she said, "See, I knew it." But what started happening? My whole um, demeanor started changing, and I didn't necessarily understand it. I do now, um, and so I kind of went on this up and down spin cycle throughout the rest of my career. Now I did still excel at what I was doing. I won numerous awards for Soldier of the Year, that type of stuff. But there was this internal struggle and this battle that I just couldn't turn off. Then I
Mhm.
went to Germany. I got stationed in Germany after 3 years. That was a great, great experience because I got to do a lot of stuff with NATO forces and training, got a chance to go to a lot of international travel to Saudi Arabia, Israel, places like that. And then in 2002, I decided I'd had enough. Um, I was still, I reapplied to Howard, got accepted, but then found out that the way they whole give you the money thing for school wasn't what I thought it was. I thought they were just going to give me my lump sum of money, send me on my way, and have me go do what I need to do. But they have the GI Bill and they pay you out in this stipend, so it wasn't what I thought it was. And then started this long battle with the VA to get my benefits for the injuries I sustained.
Oh.
Um, And let's be very clear. This is not a session to bash the VA or anything like that. The reality is, They have certain parameters that they operate under. I don't necessarily agree with them, but when I first got out of the army, they basically told me that my brain injury wasn't an issue, basically. So they only compensated me for the knee injury and the lower back injury, and that wasn't even you know compensation per se. But
Mm.
be that as it may, I'm going through life and things are happening to me that I just don't understand. Like I couldn't understand the change in my emotional disposition. Um, and my kids my kids have since described it as there was this like a darkness hovering over me. So
Mm.
they almost felt like they kind of walked on eggshells. And but I'm inside of me, so I'm not seeing that. I'm not feeling. I'm just thinking that I'm dad.
Okay. Hmm.
Um, and ultimately, um, that struggle, contributed to my divorce from my ex-wife and some other thing. And then here we go. Again, you said it. God has a way of putting people in your life, right? I'm on Facebook. I'm having this friendly conversation with this young lady, and then a couple months later, we meet at a networking meeting, and I didn't even. The funny thing was, I didn't remember her. She remembered me, right? So, and this is when Pam and I met in officially in person in 2012 at this really amazing networking group that we were a part of. I came there as a guest speaker, and then I ultimately became a part of the group.
Well,
And
I didn't know him
Go
because
ahead, Pa. Go
the
ahead.
conversation, our first initial conversation was with me. That's how I remembered him.
I didn't get that, Cap. Repeat.
Our initial conversation on Facebook, it was not friendly. We were back and forth with a disagreement. And when we met in person, I knew who he was, but he didn't know who I was.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay.
I kept it for a while. I didn't say anything.
Okay. Okay. So you met at the. I like to hear the love story. So go ahead. Tell me.
yeah, and she really didn't say anything to me until we were well along into actually dating. But we met at the networking group, and to be honest, I wasn't specifically looking for a relationship at the time. But what happened was, I came to the group as a guest speaker to share my story and so on. And then the guy who was the founder of the group, not only did he invite me to continue coming back to speak, but he also invited me to be a part of the group. And so I would show up, do my talks, etc., etc. And one of the things I noticed was that Pam was always upfront taking notes. And that caught my eye. So I started inquiring about who she was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we actually started talking. We actually got into a business together. And at the time when we were in the business together, we were on the same team, but there was this friendly competition. You know how network marketing can be. We had this friendly competition. And then from there we kept building and building in terms of friendship or whatever. And then one day we had a meeting. Her and I talked, etc. And back then I used to do graphic design, business cards or whatever. So I got a chance to meet her mom. I was talking to about doing some cards for her mom, and and then Pam tells me that her mom tells her that I like her. So, but in my head, I'm like, there's no way she can know this. But mom again, women's intuition, right? Moms, yeah, you can't put anything past them. And then later that week, I had a Chase Bank envelope with my Chase statement. And I just wrote on the envelope that I was going to marry her, and then I stuck the envelope into my laptop bag, and we go on about our business. And then we were getting closer and closer because we were spending a lot of time doing the business. We were talking, our friendship was going, and at the time, I know Pam herself wasn't actively looking to get into a relationship either. And so they say time is the master of all, and so ultimately, we started dating, and I would be, from a man's perspective, I would say, those first few years it was tough because, remember, I'm still struggling with all the social issues that I have and the mental issues unknowingly. I'll be the first to tell you, I was struggling to keep a job. I was struggling to be, the provider that a man should be for his kids and for the woman he's with, all of that. And then a year into our relationship, life handed us our first huge, huge, huge challenge. And you mentioned this when you called me about the interview, when I had my accident and lost my fingers.
Yes, I remember you saying that. Mercy.
Yes, I
So
had
tell
taken
me,
a job.
yes, tell us, we want to hear more about what happened, if that's
Yeah,
okay.
so again, here I am. I'm having this, and I don't even remember. I don't even know if Pam remembers. I had done so many odd jobs along the way. And again, we're still in the dating phase. We're not married. We're not engaged or anything. And I would always tell people, man, she had all rights to just like, man, I don't need to deal with this. I can leave. You know what I mean? I mean, because at the time, Pam had Pam had maybe three different businesses, and plus she was working or whatever. And I'm struggling to find my way. So I took this job with a gentleman at the time that was a friend of mine. Um, and the job was a cell phone tower technician. The guys that go out and they climb the towers to make sure the cell phones work and stuff like that. And we were way out in West Texas one day, and just an unfortunate freak accident. My hand got caught in a machine, broke my arm, a compound fracture in several places. I lost two fingers on my left hand, and I ultimately ended up losing one finger on my right hand. But here's the thing about that. When when I had the accident, and they called for the medevac to come pick me up. One, they took me to the wrong hospital. That's the first thing. That's the first divine intervention there. They took me to the wrong hospital. The second thing was that at that hospital, a gentleman who was not a doctor, who wasn't even on call, was there, and he was the person that was able to. So instead of, because they were sending me for a full-on amputation above the elbow. That's how badly mangled my arm was. It was terrible, and I was awake the whole time, like from the time my hand got stuck in the machine, getting on the helicopter, arriving at the emergency. I was conscious the whole entire time. Well, I get there. This gentleman walks in. He kind of messes with my arm a little bit. He tells me that he can save my arm. However, I had to be mentally and emotionally prepared for a couple years of physical therapy to learn how to reuse my arm and my hand and so on.
Right.
And
But
and I'm sitting in the hospital room, and I don't know if it's possible to fall in love with somebody over and over again. But I remember this happened on a Saturday evening. Sunday morning, I'm sitting in the hospital room, and then the nurse opens the door and says, "There's someone here to see you." And I thought it was my coworkers coming to see me or whatever. And then she walks in, and I was like, "Wow!" And she starts crying. I'm crying. It was, and she spent a few days in the hospital with me before we came back home. But I think that was another one of those moments for me where I knew, like, man, this is who I want to spend the rest of my life with. And and she would tell you that experience was hard because, one, I I have an aversion to medicine. I have an aversion. I wouldn't take the painkillers. Now, there were a few occasions where the pain was so bad that I had to take the painkillers. But for most of that time, I didn't take any painkillers at home. And I mean, she's the caregiver. She had to bathe me. I couldn't bathe myself. I
mm,
couldn't clean myself when I used the restroom. I
mhm.
couldn't even feed myself for those first few months. And then on top of that, Pam had to go back out to work
Okay.
because the company that I was working with, they basically, I got hurt on Saturday, and Wednesday they fired me basically.
Lord of
Yeah.
mercy.
We hadn't even left the hospital yet, and he basically let me go. And the reason he did that was because I asked about the insurance so I can get help with the medical bills.
Of course.
Um, and again, we start dating in June of 2012. This is October of 2013. This is not even 2 years into the relationship yet, and we get hit with this.
So
And
let me hear one side of the story right now. So I don't know how wow, the guts you have to pull through all of this. But let's hear what Pam has. Let's hear her side of the story. How she felt when she got the message or the phone call, however you got it, that you were in hospital. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, we have
You
shared
can
this
start
story.
earlier. You can work your way from
Okay.
point.
It's funny because we've shared this story so many times, but I never got this emotional behind it. But I remember, I know that the day before he left, he got all of his kids together. We had this big dinner at the house, a lot of pictures, and the next day he went to work. And we wasn't in the best place, but we was making it work, I always looked at Sundiata as like it was a conscious decision. Like he said earlier, neither of us was looking for anybody. It was a conscious decision on my side to begin dating him. And I just felt like he was the one. And when I would go to the meetings, first of all, he was targeted. He never knew that, but he was targeted in our networking event by the owner of that networking group. I was one of the key members in the group, and he was a powerful speaker. So that explains me being at the front of the room. I was always just so in awe when he was
learning. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just couldn't, when I knew that he was going to be at the front of the room, I was early and I was in that front seat, not because of any attraction, but it was just, I knew I was going to walk away with something. And that's what I like probably most about him is I'm going to walk away learning something, and I enjoyed being in spaces with him simply because of that to start. But when we had the dinner with the kids, I don't even know what made him. I think it was his suggestion that we get together. It was a small apartment. Sundiata has a lot of kids.
You know what?
You mentioned.
We made it work, and he went off, and I remember that phone call. I even think my phone was off. I think my phone was off then. And I think I got a message from one of his friends who I never really met. But some kind of way they got the message to me that he was in an accident, but I couldn't get any details. And I remember telling my daughter that I had to go. And I called my mom to come to the house and stay with her. And I didn't even know where I was going. I just got on the phone. Let me tell you something. We had this vehicle that we had to carry a battery charger with us because it would just turn off at any moment.
Wow.
And so I jump in that car. My mom let me use her phone. And if you knew my mom, that wasn't going down. But for some reason, she let me take her phone with me. And I remember driving and I put on an NFL station because I said if I was in the car with him, he would want to hear this station. I think it's 105.7.
105.3.
105.3. So I put it on that station and I just put in my in the MapQuest or whatever we was using on the app. I put in the hospital in what were you? Where were you? What city?
Was it Midland?
Midland. And I just did hospital in Midland, and it took me there, and I drove. The car didn't stop. I got to the hospital. They told me I was at the wrong hospital. And I'm like, what? I didn't understand. So I got in. She told me where he was. And I went over to that hospital. I remember standing in the door, and he looked so sad. He had a real, you know how you see a picture of a sad face, like his lips was sad face. And I couldn't imagine him sitting there by himself, no family. There was no coworkers there. And he was just there, and not knowing what I was walking into. But I remember us sitting there for probably up to a week, trying to figure things out. And I call him an overachiever because we were in a network marketing company then, and he was on his phone using the good fingers, challenging people.
Really?
And people thinking it was Halloween time, and people were thinking that his pictures were costume. And we was like, no, this is real. But he's out there just challenging people in this company, and he's like, I still got fingers. I can still communicate. But, and that just describes him to this day. Like, he is to be someone who goes through what he goes through behind the scene. I think that a lot of people who watch and follow him don't truly understand his struggle because he does so much more than the average person. But yeah, that's him.
Okay. Oh boy.
And that's just the beginning.
Yeah.
What it is love. You asked me LOVE. Unconditional love.
Yeah.
That's what it has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree because I'm not going to say that process was not easy.
Of course.
Nope.
Because you don't know the future, because you needs his fingers, and I guess the thing that kept you was that you see what's really inside him, that he what you just said, he's dialing even though he has his fingers all wrapped up in the hospitals. That
made it easy for me. I think if he was a complainer and had pity parties, I probably wouldn't be here today, but he definitely made it easy for me to care for him.
Yes. This is a beautiful story. I hope you get your book together, the both of you.
We need to.
I really hope you do that. If there's one thing from having this interview, this conversation, get a book together. The world needs to read it. I remember seeing the both of you driving in the car and talking, and I was just observing the both of you. I could see that there was just that chemistry between you both. And when you got married, I watched you on that day. You better believe it.
It's so funny how many people that I have met later in years that tells me that they've watched us and watched us get married, and we're like, wow.
Yes, because when we watched you, yes, things were going on, but for me personally, I was never the same when I watched you both. It really did motivate me. And so go ahead now, because I know it's still. So you got married. And,
long overdue too. I was having this conversation. It's interesting. I was just having this conversation with some of the young guys at work about relationships and marriage. Because one of them was asking me, like, how does my wife handle me being gone as often as I am with work? And there's a bigger component to that. But I was talking to them about there has to be a willingness to keep fighting. And I think that's what's held us together. Because again, I will be as transparent as I can be, and this is for the men that are going to see this and for the women. I was not on a good footing at all. And as I shared earlier, I wasn't providing for this woman the way that she needed to be provided for from a husband's perspective, or someone in a serious relationship, however you want to look at it. Um, be, for all for and it doesn't necessarily matter why I wasn't doing that, but it's not easy for a woman to have to carry the load as caregiver and breadwinner, right? And I think what has happened is, Pam has consciously made the choice to keep in this fight with me. And I remember, I don't know if she remembers this, but I remember when we went to our first date at IHOP. At
Just
least
one
that was
moment.
that's the first date for me.
Okay, so you went on the first date. Just
Yeah,
one moment, please. Okay. All
yeah.
right. So it's so great that you could come on to talk with us today. This has not ended. I know there's so much more to hear. But this is part one, and I want to thank you so much for coming. So we're going to have a part two to this story. But before we end, I just want to leave a thought as I normally do. And it says, there, Dr. Kimar T.J. Douglas said, I don't really agree that everything happens for a reason. And he said, I just believe that God can make a reason out of anything that happens.
Wow.
Thank
Interesting.
you all for being here. Thank you all for hearing these lovebirds. Stay tuned.
Thank you for
Until
having
then,
us.